Like, if you can
still murder,
save their life and you choose not, like the Hippocratic Oath, dude, you're murdering.
Hypocritical is what the Catholic Church is.
Okay,
just so you know. I'm angry about it. Hi, I'm Sister Kat.
And I'm Sister Gabe. And we're the sisters next door. Talking about spooky stuff. Like eternal damnation.
Yes. Oh, let us tell you about eternal damnation. And how it is inevitable for all of us.
Sorry, you're going to hell. I don't make the rules. I just follow them to the book. No, we're the Ghouls Next Door, a media literacy show from a horror lens where we explore the real-life, historical, religious influences behind our cinematic fears. And as part of our Satanic Panic series, we are talking about Immaculate.
Yeah, and what a time. It was good. It was like, I liked it better than I expected. It was weird. A lot to process, I would say.
Yeah, it definitely is weird. It's
I don't know, we'll talk about it.
yeah, Immaculate from 2024. I would say not specifically like the Satanic Panic. It definitely is saying something though, and given that it is a religious, setting horror film, and there's so many films this year that have had pregnancy horror. It felt important to cover not only the Satanic Panic craze that we're seeing, but also this like fear of pregnancy and fear of the lack of control of our bodies.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of Satanic Panic's fears were stemmed in the Catholic Church. The Pope wrote the foreword for Michelle Remembers, so they set it off.
Mm-hmm.
So it really does tie back in that way. And like also just thinking like the harm that has been done by the church, like kind of collectively from the birth of Satanic Panic until present day, and also like just a long history of harm against women, against humanity as a whole. There's like, for saying we love God, there's a lot of stuff that they did that did not suggest that they really felt that way.
Mm-hmm. Not that they loved their fellow man or whatever.
Yeah, like it's because of the fact that the Pope was so involved in perpetuating the Satanic Panic, I think it is like fitting.
Mm-hmm.
I'll defend it. I'll defend our choice to have it, because like it is very much that, because the Pope like was a big proponent, and lots of bishops and other people exploited lots of people to perpetuate Satanic Panic in the U.S. so that people would be for not capitalism, same thing, but Catholicism again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's all tied together for sure. And I definitely wanted to cover it as soon as I saw it out there. I'm a decent fan of Sydney Sweeney, mm-hmm. and I think a film like this, like, it was pretty on the nose, I will say. For folks, it's very on the nose. It's not being subtle or sneaky or anything like that, but it is what it is. And I think like it just did what it wanted to do, and then it was done. Mm-hmm. And it's very predictable, but that's not really the point. The point was just to share this story, and I think, okay, cool, thank you.
Yeah, and from what I read, like, it seemed like people appreciated how much gore was actually present.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it didn't really step away from that too much. It wasn't like scary necessarily, but like it was definitely like creepy and like gory.
Well, it's definitely unsettling.
Like, had the trappings, of horror in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm. It definitely, it has, so like the situation is scary,
mm-hmm.
and the predicament is scary. So I think that they did really well with.
Mm-hmm.
But why don't we hop in and talk about this film so that we can tell you why it's included and why it's important and why you might want to watch it. So Immaculate is from this year, 2024, and it's about Cecilia, a woman of devout faith, is warmly welcomed to the picture-perfect Italian countryside, where she is offered a new role at an illustrious convent. But it becomes clear to Cecilia that her new home harbors dark and horrifying secrets, and it's directed by Michael Mohan, or Mohan. Like Lohan.
It's really funny as like a description of the film, because like I would not have described the Italian countryside as like illustrious or ideal or picture perfect.
She didn't really do anything.
Like it was Graham from the Get Out, and you didn't really see Italy, so it's just funny that that's how they described it.
Yeah,
on IMDb.
Yeah. The only time you see it is like in a really traumatizing scene, like when you see the countryside. She's like running through it covered in blood. So.
Yeah,
I'm not so sure about that one.
And also, like, the second she joins, they're like, ew, you're here.
Some of them are. Some of them are happy.
Yeah. The old lady was happy to see her. It's like...
And the father.
Mostly it. Oh, yeah. He likes anybody who he can exploit. He was so excited.
Let me tell you about this film. So... Immaculate is a psychological horror film that delves into the themes of motherhood, faith, and the societal control over women's bodies. And we follow young American nun Cecilia, who arrives at the Italian convent with little more than a suitcase and a shaky grasp of Italian, which really sets the tone for her vulnerability in this strict, eerie environment. Like, she's definitely not, comfortable here. And when she's asked, like, when she's coming in, she has a one-way ticket, and these officers question her about what brought her here. And when they ask what drove her to make the decision to live her life in a convent, to which they think that's a waste, right? For this young, supple body, not a woman, supple body, which is just a great use of Sydney Sweeney, to be honest. It's a waste. Why do you do that? And she responds that it's not a choice. It wasn't ever a choice for her. It's not her decision. Like, it was, she kind of alludes to it being like fate. Like, of course you do that. Like, this is what God wants you to do. But that idea, this like illusion of choice and like not having any choice comes up a lot in the film. But we're right out the gate. She can't speak Italian, but she knows what these men were saying because of the way that they're looking at her.
She's creeped out immediately. Yeah.
And we'd already seen how dark the convent could be, because when the film starts, it introduces us to the convent with these red-veiled nuns who bury a novice alive for trying to escape. Like, that's our introduction to this place. So we're like, she's going into some danger. We don't know what they're doing, but it's not good. But Cecilia does settle into this safe haven where the nuns care for each other and have established themselves as a home for wounded birds, right? This women who have nowhere else to go, who have no choices. Right. And Cecilia spends her days caring for aging nuns and forming a bond with Sister Gwen, who shares a cynical outlook on Father Sal and the convent's culture. And Gwen is an agnostic who sought refuge in the convent to escape an abusive ex. She does not trust men, reasonably. And this is a place full of mostly women. So she'll do her duty, whether God is there or not. This is a safe place, and she gets a free meal and a bed. But the isolation is palpable, and it's amplified by the language barrier and the oppressive control exerted by the nuns and priests, who see her more as a vessel for their hopes than an actual person. And her happy nunnery life is quickly halted after some unsettling nightmares and interactions with older nuns who are mentally unwell. And things take a further turn when Cecilia unexpectedly vomits, hinting at her mysterious pregnancy. It is the Immaculate Conception.
Yep.
The male authority figures. Good.
I was gonna say, it's like the title means something.
Yes.
I remember Gabe, I said Inception, right?
Yeah.
I was texting you about it.
Like, no. The male authority figures at the convent start scrutinizing her chastity, declaring her fetus was conceived without sin, and the religious figures in the story view her as a means to an end, like I said, this vessel to bring forth the new Christ, reinforcing how powerful institutions can exploit women's bodies for their own desires.
It's a miracle. You are with child.
And in a powerful climax, Cecilia, bloodied and in labor, unleashes a fierce resistance against her oppressors. And the graphic depiction of childbirth, along with symbolic imagery like her dressed up as a modern-day Blessed Virgin, really underscores the film's commentary on societal control over women's bodies. It is not subtle in the least.
Yeah.
And Immaculate is a bold horror film that dives deep into the struggles surrounding women's reproductive rights and bodily autonomy, all through the gripping journey of Cecilia. It's thought-provoking, and it's an exploration that shines a spotlight on the intense physical and psychological impacts of losing control over one's body, especially against a government or control, like, authoritative body that isn't giving you the autonomy that you are deserved of. And the film's rich symbolism and powerful narrative make it a must-see, as it beautifully illustrates the resilience required to push back against oppressive forces. And as Cecilia navigates her harrowing experience, viewers are left not only terrified, but also contemplating the broader implications of her story. Like I said, not subtle. It's a chilling reminder of the fight for autonomy and the very real struggles that women are facing today, right now. And Immaculate manages to intertwine horror with real-world concerns in the shadow of a country hell-bent on reducing women's personhood. Like, it takes place in Italy, but she's from Detroit. Okay? Yeah. So I think one of the big things about this film and some of the other films that have popped up this year is that it's quite timely and it's quite obvious that we are seeing these films at a time, it's an election year, and we are still feeling the reverberations and now finally seeing the effects of the decisions that were made during the Trump administration. So this is horrors of pregnancy in a post-Roe v. Wade America. This is the fear that we as a society are feeling collectively and are using media to express. So the surge of pregnancy body horror in films has become a poignant reflection of the societal anxieties in a post-Roe v. Wade America, right? Following the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade, restrictions on abortion and reproductive rights have intensified, raising urgent concerns about women's autonomy over their own bodies. Just like this film. It's like such an obvious analogy. Like, again, you look at it, you're like, okay, I see what you're trying to say. But I mean, it's necessary. I really do think so. And there's an element to it that I think is pretty clever. But this intersection of horror and societal critique becomes particularly compelling, drawing audiences into a thrilling yet thought-provoking experience that reflects on these pressures. Horror has always had a really great place in cinematic history as expressing the woes and concerns and traumas of people at any given moment. And so this is a way to express some of those fears and anger that we would be feeling. So filmmakers are harnessing the horror genre to critique these pressing issues, presenting pregnancy and childbirth in unsettling and graphic ways. So you have Immaculate, The First Omen, Apartment 7A, and Alien Romulus, who all dive into the chilling theme of invasive pregnancies born from non-consensual encounters. And each narrative brings a unique twist to the concept of pregnancy, transforming it into a metaphor for the loss of bodily autonomy. And these films don't just touch on the horror of unwanted pregnancies, they plunge us into the deep, unsettling waters of violation and control. They resonate with viewers by amplifying societal anxieties about reproductive rights and consent, creating a haunting reflection of the real-world struggles. And it's fascinating to see how these filmmakers tap into such intense themes, showcasing that trauma that people are facing through their characters. These narratives symbolize the invasive nature of forced pregnancies, often portraying women as mere vessels for reproduction, overshadowing their personal dreams and well-being. Just personhood. Yeah. And Immaculate specifically dives into this issue by presenting a difficult and overtly symbolic story about a nun who finds herself pregnant without having had sex, right? By twisting it and tangling it up with a religious story, like something that is untouchable. Right? Like, this is an exception to the rule, of blessings. So this miraculous yet involuntary pregnancy is a representation of losing that bodily autonomy. Like, as soon as it happens, she is no longer a full person. And we can see how external forces are able to manipulate and control women's bodies, stripping them of their choices. No choices. The whole film. And our current external forces are the new abortion laws that are cropping up across the country, which are putting the lives of women in danger and in a variety of ways. The film mirrors these restrictive abortion laws that force women to carry unwanted pregnancies to term, even in cases of rape and incest, or the laws that deem a fetus's life more important than the human who's carrying it, forbidding surgeries on pregnant women, even if their lives are actively threatened.
Yeah.
So we've already been informed of deaths and like preventable deaths that have occurred because of this ruling and the Trump administration's effect on women's health and freedoms. We are seeing those results now. And so the film's graphic imagery, like the violent morning sickness, her losing teeth, the physical constriction, really drives home the horrors of forced pregnancy and just like is very true to like a stressful pregnancy period, right? It can be a hard time even when you want it to be happening, right? And despite being revered like as this new virginal mother, Cecilia is denied proper medical care, right? And she has to resort to like faking a miscarriage in hopes of getting to a hospital. Like, it's so, again, so on the nose, right? The idea that like we can't even go to a hospital. We can't trust the person who is in charge of our health and well-being. Like we're restricted. Think about like a woman in Texas trying to come up with an excuse to go stay over to get life-saving surgery, you know? And these, this is clearly a reflection of our current landscape where the welfare of an unborn child is prioritized over the mother's own well-being. And these disturbing scenes tap into the fears many women face as access to safe and legal abortions become more restricted. Because it's removing safe abortions does not get rid of all of them. It just gets rid of the ones that are safe. So there's also this level of choosing a nun as a protagonist, and it's very intentional as it does add an extra layer of restriction and that lack of power, because nuns symbolize purity and chastity, and their bodies are often viewed as sacred. They are supposed to be untouchable. They are pure. They are for Jesus. So by placing a nun at the center of an involuntary pregnancy, the film highlights a profound violation of personal and spiritual sanctity. So, not that like nuns being abused is more intense than non-nuns being abused, but there's an added layer of their spirituality and the one decision that they supposedly made to be a nun.
The one decision. To be chaste and whatever. That's violated. Taken away. So this coupled with the decision to specifically cast Sydney Sweeney, and that's where I think the film shines. Casting Sydney Sweeney, whose body has been commodified, over-sexualized, and been subject to public scrutiny for nearly her entire career, enhances the film's critique of how society polices women's bodies and makes her role even more impactful. And Sweeney, in an interview with Variety, shared her objectified existence and what inspired her to sign on as a producer for this film. Like she was like, I'm invested. I want to tell this story and I need to be in it. And she said, people feel free to speak about me in whatever way they want because they believe that I've signed my life away, that I'm not on a human level anymore because I'm an actor. And that's been discussed in a multitude of ways for actors or people who are celebrities. Chappell Roan is having that same thing of like, I'm just a person. You cannot be treating me that way. I am regular. And as Cecilia is adorned in flashy garments, much unlike her chaste and pious nun uniform, she's the new Virgin Mother, only significantly more heartbroken and terrified. And we see how this miracle is more nightmare to the young woman. And we see this powerful close-up shot where Cecilia's inner conflicts is shown as she stands frozen, tears in her eyes, feeling trapped in a situation she never agreed to. She just wanted to be a chaste nun. She just wanted to give back to Jesus for saving her life, right? Yeah.
And it's so important that Cecilia is a nun, right? A person whose life is already in the hands of the church. We see how women's bodies are controlled and exploited by institutions all the time, be they religious, political, or societal. And this control is often masked as morality or tradition, yet it ultimately oppresses women. We just slap on a new paint job on it.
Yeah. Satan plus.
Satan plus. And what's particularly interesting in how this film is how the film subverts religious beliefs, transforming them into something sinister. The convent, which is supposed to be a place of sanctuary and faith, instead becomes a setting where those very beliefs are twisted to exert control over Cecilia. Now she can't leave, and not because of a choice. Not because this is where she wants to be, because she cannot leave. And it highlights the darker side of religious doctrine, suggesting that what is often viewed as sacred can also be oppressive. And this contrast makes the story even more compelling, as it forces us to confront how easily faith can be weaponized against individuals, particularly women. These wounded birds are in this vulnerable place. They come here for sanctuary and are immediately put into harm's way, and now you don't have choice. You're not allowed to have choice anymore, and it's not having choice is good for you. Then you're a good woman if you don't do the choice.
Yeah.
Like it, you know,
or you just get to be a part. Like it's like a whole thing. I'll get into but Italy and Catholicism has hated women for a very long time. It's like their entire history is baked in that. So it's just like they are rude.
Yeah. Really, like Catholicism for sure. I mean, just the Bible, the King James Version, is so manipulated from the original text and removes all autonomy of women in it. It took out all the autonomy of women. It took all of the agency from the women, and the books that were written by women. Right? It makes you know Mary Magdalene into someone that they would consider less than when she was an equal. And it's it's a blasphemous.
That's the whole thing.
But it's because of the different versions of the Bible that were created. It's specifically the King James Version, which is just wrong. It was just that he had a lot of money. So he printed it. We did that. We covered that. So so there's that level, like the convent being trapped there as opposed to finding solace and refuge in these walls. Now it's a prison. And then there's the male authority figures, which are the priests, who represent these powerful institutions that impose their will on women's reproductive choices. Father Sal and the other priests, the ones who aggressively question Cecilia's loyalty, belief, and chastity, do not care about Cecilia in the least. They view her as the vessel for their savior, and the abuse that they put her body through nails that point home. They don't care what shape her body is in the end, because hers is not the body that matters. It's the baby that it was maybe a monster. We don't even see it. And as Margaret Atwood's dystopian novel, The Handmaid's Tale, cautioned, the convergence of far-right politics, male dominance, and religious ideologies can lead to women's bodies being treated as state property, subjected to cruel restrictions and control. And we inch closer and closer to that unfortunate future every day.
Every day.
The election's coming. The election maybe even is here. I don't remember when we are posting this episode. So this might even be more intense. So maybe I'll have an addendum. But it's just so important to have these conversations and people having that like people conveniently forgetting what we just went through and what we're currently feeling, being an effect of what we already just gone through. But also in Handmaid's Tale thing, Sydney Sweeney was in the Handmaid's Tale show as Eden. But overall, the film mirrors this loss of autonomy and emphasizes the invasive control exerted by legal and societal forces over women's reproductive choices. And Immaculate is not just a horror film, it's a compelling commentary on the ongoing struggles for reproductive rights in today's society, and it is not at all subtle about it. No, she didn't want that baby.
Yeah,
it wasn't.
And it's also like the history of the Catholic Church is also not subtle. Like it's just blatantly messed up at the end of the day. Like this is like very much like everything that happened in this film happens actively. Maybe not like them doing genetic modifications to make the next coming of Christ, but like abuse of women, abuse of people, perpetuation and manipulation of the Bible because no one else can read it because it's in Latin or whatever language. Like, you know, we've been doing this for years, since the birth of capitalism. That was the birth of capitalism. They made it all. Everything that we experience today, they started. So this is Kat doesn't like the Catholic Church, just so everyone is aware. I wrote my senior thesis in college about it. Basically how trash and hypocritical the Catholic
ruined
Church is.
everything.
So if you love Catholicism, or specifically like the Catholic Church, I'm sorry.
You probably shouldn't be listening to this episode.
You probably shouldn't.
It's not for you.
We're gonna work on the keywords so that
you don't find us.
Yeah. But yeah, like it was very honest, and I think considering, like, as Gabe said, like the stakes that are currently at play and like have been at play, honestly, for a minute, ever since they did overturn Roe v. Wade and in the 70s when they enacted it in the first place, like we have not had any bodily autonomy for very long. And it's pretty
not
typical.
Fully, ever.
Yeah, no. And we've barely had it. It just doesn't feel like, because like the 90s babies and the early 2000s babies were born like a little later, so it wasn't like right in our purview. So we were fed this like, we're past it, it's fixed thing, where we were like barely out of it. Like so much of that stuff that was taken away again was like just barely new at the same time. Like, so our history is definitely trying to repeat itself. It is definitely stressful as heck. And Catholicism. So I'll get into that. So misogyny is embedded into the systems of the Catholic Church from their ideation. In Italy, I think it was like in the 1500s. It was my senior thesis. I'm going to need to go back and read it at some point. But it was many, many moons ago, many, many years ago. And they were basically, the Catholic Church had started and was gaining traction. And then they started to realize money could happen. And then mercantile culture began in Italy. And then the Catholic Church says, I can get in on this. So the Catholic Church itself, its systems are inherently hierarchical and also exclusively male. Nuns don't even get a title within the Catholic Church. So you can already tell how they feel about women there. And then additionally, in the time where the Catholic Church got all of its wealth and power, women were not considered people at all. Essentially, the people who would become nuns were largely people who were, their husbands left them, died, or divorced, like basically threw them into the street so that they could remarry. Essentially, so you could be a nun, or you were forced into sex work. Essentially, there was two choices.
No sex, or definitely sex you don't want.
Yeah, exactly. And also, like, if you didn't want to get married, that was like literally the only place you could go. So it would become a refuge also for LGBTQIA people, anyone who wasn't trying to like be a children factory, who just didn't want to have kids. Nuns were the place to go for that. And then unfortunately, because the Catholic Church is systemically and inherently misogynist, lots of nuns experienced abuse even in the place that was supposed to be their one safe location in this Catholically dominated space. So there's like countless books basically about how hypocritical the Catholic Church is when it comes to money, because you're not allowed to have money. You're supposed to not live that kind of life. So basically you could pay, what are they called? This is just like the 10-minute SparkNote version of, not a little 10 minutes, that'd be too much, but the little quick version of my thesis, which was basically the Catholic Church would make it so you could pay to forgive your sins. And then that sparked all of this hypocrisy and corruption, etc. And that's why King James even made a Bible, because he's like, I see that power, I want it. We're going to have all the same beliefs, but I want the money for it. So the Catholic Church is inherently patriarchal because it is exclusively male. All the hierarchy and power structures within the church are men. So Pope, Supreme Leader, cardinals, senior church officials, archbishops, bishops, leaders in dioceses, priests, ordained ministers and deacons all are people with power,
Mm-hmm.
and they're all male. And then underneath of that, nuns or religious sisters are ones who've taken vows with a religious order and have dedicated their lives to prayer, community service, and various ministries, but they do not receive any holy orders and thus are not part of the clerical hierarchy. Their roles are often focused on education, healthcare, and social services, reflecting their commitment to the church's mission and values. But despite their significant contributions, nuns are often considered to have a second-class status within the church, as highlighted in various documents discussing their experiences and challenges. And all positions of status within the church are exclusively male, which sets the tone of how oppression towards women would be systemic and unchanging, because the people benefiting from it have literally no motivation whatsoever to change anything because they're benefiting from it. Also, there's a lot of hypocrisy in the Catholic Church, specifically on the topic of abortion. So the Catholic Church has long been a vocal opponent of abortion, advocating for the sanctity of life from the moment of conception. However, the staunch pro-life stance is marred in instances of hypocrisy, particularly when examining the church's internal contradictions and experiences of nuns who have faced abuse and have been forced to have abortions. Also, when you have an abortion in the Catholic Church, you get kicked out. So the entire thing is that women are assaulted and then forced to have abortions and then kicked out of the only place that they have to be home.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a whole thing. The Catholic Church's opposition to abortion is deeply rooted in the interpretation of the Bible. Essentially, they love to manipulate scripture because they're used to people not knowing what it says. Essentially, because that's what Catholic Church was. They read it to you in another language that you did not know, and they interpret it, and then you experience it based on what they're telling you, and you never get to read the source documents yourself. So key scripture passages are often cited to support pro-life stances. For instance, Psalm 13:9-13 -16 speaks of God's intimate knowledge of an unborn child. For you created my inmost being, you knit me together in my mother's womb. Similarly, Jeremiah 15 states, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. These verses are used to argue that life begins at conception and that every unborn child is known to be valued by God. However, as noted in an article titled, The Catholic Church has no moral argument on abortions, they say they don't always include the final part of that statement, which states, I appointed you as a prophet to the nations. That seems to imply that this is more a prophecy specific to Jeremiah than it is to something that generally applies to everyone.
Yeah, it's not just any baby. It's a very specific, important
baby. Yeah, so it's like
this baby already had a job.
Prayer, manipulating what the Bible says to suit your specific wants and needs.
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
The church also references the 10 commandments, particularly the commandment, thou shalt not kill, from Exodus, to assert that abortion is a form of murder. Interpretation has been the cornerstone of the church's moral teachings, leading to an unwavering opposition to abortion in all circumstances. However, it seems they are fine with it when it comes to covering up the crimes of priests and, in the name of God, crusades,
or letting,
if it's for you.
Letting women die, that's murder. Like, if you can
still murder,
save their life and you choose not, like the Hippocratic Oath, dude, you're murdering.
Hypocritical is what the Catholic Church is.
Okay,
so you know, I'm angry about it. And that's the whole reason things are the way that they are. That's the whole reason things are the way that they are. The reason she goes from Detroit to Italy is super fitting, because everything that's happening in Italy in terms of what they created is here. I hate it.
Yeah.
So biblical instances of abortion. Interestingly, the Bible also contains passages that suggest a more complex view of abortion. Especially, it's also like still taking autonomy away from women, but they're fine with abortion if you're not loyal.
Mm-hmm.
So one such passage, Numbers 5:11-31, which describes a ritual for determining a wife's fidelity. If a husband suspects his wife is
Of infidelity,
he brings her to a priest who makes her a drink of bitter water mixture. If she is guilty, the mixture causes her to miscarry. The passage indicates that abortion was used as a test of loyalty, complicating the church's claim on a consistent biblical pro-life ethic. So, like, also,
That happens in a book I read. This Juniper and Thorn. The father would make them drink essentially something like that because he thought that they were being promiscuous, and they didn't know that it would essentially cause an abortion. They just thought it was witchcraft and would show that they were being bad.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, but it's also like if there's a medical thing that you're feeding someone that's going to cause an abortion, whether or not they were loyal to their husband or not, doesn't matter. You just killed the fetus.
Yeah, what if it was your baby?
Yeah, and now you think they're loyal, so you go throw them in the street and take away their name because you don't exist in that time period without being married to a man. Like if you got divorced, which you couldn't do, but if like your husband said, I don't like you anymore, you would be erased from history. Like you wouldn't even have a name. Sorry, it makes me mad. Okay, I'm done. Nuns speaking out in favor of abortion rights. There's actually like a decent amount of nuns who have done this. Despite the official stance of the Catholic Church, some nuns have courageously spoken out in favor of abortion rights, challenging the binary pro-life, pro-choice narrative. One notable figure is Sister Teresa Forcades, a Benedictine nun. Yeah, Benedictine. Oh my God. Benedictine nun and medical doctor. Forcades argues that women should have autonomy to make their own decisions. Regarding abortion. And she contends that the church's teachings can be interpreted in a way that respects both the sanctity of life and the dignity of women. Her views have sparked significant debate and controversy within the Catholic community, with some labeling her as the nun of the devil.
Of course.
Forcades' stance highlights an internal conflict with the church regarding abortion. She believes that her perspective is compatible with the gospel and church teaching, emphasizing the need for a more nuanced understanding of the issue, and her advocacy for abortion rights underscores the complexity of the moral landscape within the church and the need for open dialogue and reform. There's also a lot, like a shocking, like an upsetting amount of stories, specifically, like the Pope even admits to it, that nuns in the places that they're supposed to be safe who are not able to leave and are abused by priests. So trigger warning there. The hypocrisy of the Catholic Church's pro-life stance is starkly evident in the many stories of nuns who have faced sexual abuse and forced abortions at the hands of priests. Reports have documented numerous cases where nuns were sexually exploited by clergy members, leading to pregnancies. In many instances, these nuns were coerced into having abortions, often arranged and paid for by the priests involved, and the Pope even admits that this is a known issue, meaning it is widespread enough that they can't hide it. One of the most comprehensive studies on the issue that was conducted by the late Sister Mara Donahue, who reported that nuns were considered safe sexual partners for priests who feared contracting HIV from sex workers or women in the general population. Her findings revealed that harassment and rape of nuns by priests was alarmingly common. When nuns became pregnant, they were often forced to undergo abortions, further compounding their trauma. And like within the church, you get like excommunicated if you have an abortion. So like you're already stripped of your autonomy, and then you also lose your home. You also like it's not that you want to be there if that's what's happening to you, but like it's just like a whole thing. So the Nuns Too movement brought some issues to the forefront, demanding accountability and justice for victims. Former nuns have called to the Pope to launch inquiries into the sexual abuse and forced abortions they endured, highlighting the needs for systemic change within the church. And in an article, The Catholic Church Has No Moral Argument, that I quoted before, they quote from another article from BBC in 2019, where Pope Francis admitted there had been clerical abuse of nuns, including sexual slavery. And the BBC report said, he said the church was attempting to address the problem, but it was still going on.
It was attempting to address the problem. That's the first step. That's what I'm saying.
Like, yeah, but like, I want to say, like, that's why it's such an issue that there are no women who have any power within the hierarchical structure of the Catholic Church, because like they have no incentive. They have no incentive to help anyone other than themselves. And clearly all the other people in power are benefiting from this. So why would they stop them? Like, it's just all kind of connects. The current stance on abortion in the United States and its impact on autonomy and health. So thank you, Gabe, for this section. As of now, the legal landscape of abortion in the United States is highly fragmented and varies significantly from state to state. The Supreme Court's decision in Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization in 2022 overturned Roe v. Wade, which had a federally protected the right to abortion. The ruling has allowed individual states to set their own abortion laws, leading to a patchwork of regulations across the country, which results in states with restrictive laws, several states that have enacted highly restricted abortion laws, including near total bans and severe limitations on when and how abortions can be performed, and states with protective laws. It just basically changed like the whole landscape of where you can or cannot. And the current state of abortion laws in the United States poses significant threats to the autonomy and health of individuals with uteruses. Here are some key concerns post Roe v. Wade being overturned. States across the U.S. have enacted pretty drastic abortion bans. So the states with total abortion bans are Alabama, bans nearly all abortions with no exceptions for rape or incest. Only if the mother's life is at serious risk can an abortion be performed. Mind you, like that has to be proven.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of doctors will just hesitate because they don't want to be in prison or sued. Arkansas, similar to Alabama, it only allows abortions to save a mother's life in a medical emergency. 6-week bans are in Texas. Senate Bill 8 SB 8 bans abortions around 6 weeks, often before many people even realize that they're pregnant. It also lets private citizens sue anyone involved in an abortion. And in Georgia, their heartbeat bill bans abortions once a fetus's heartbeat is detected, typically around 6 weeks. Additionally, there's trigger laws. So Louisiana, Kentucky, and South Dakota, these states had trigger laws that immediately banned abortions after the overturning of Roe v. Wade, usually only allowing exceptions if the mother's life is at risk. And waiting periods and mandatory counseling have been enacted. So in Missouri, there is a 72-hour waiting period between the consultation and the abortion, which can delay access significantly. Utah enforces a similar 72-hour wait and requires counseling that often includes information aimed at discouraging abortion.
Yeah, they make you have to like sit with it. Like it's not hard enough as it is. Yeah. Or what if you're dying?
And you can't. Yeah, like you need an ectopic pregnancy. Or
you don't
like
got 72 hours.
Yeah, you would be dead. So restrictions on medication abortion. Oklahoma has put laws in place that limit medical abortions, or medication, specifically abortions, requiring individuals to visit a doctor in person for both the prescription and the medication itself, which can be a barrier for those in rural areas, as well as people without insurance. Bans on specific procedures. Ohio, the state has banned dilation and evacuation, D&E procedures, the most common method for second trimester abortions, except when the parent's life is at risk. And these laws have created significant barriers to accessing safe and legal abortions, pushing some people to seek unsafe alternatives or carry unwanted pregnancies to term. Critics argue that this is disproportionately affecting low-income individuals, BIPOC communities, and those living in rural areas, worsening existing healthcare inequities. It also poses like a significant threat to like our autonomy in the country overall. Like there's lots of bills that have been proposed to limit travel. So like even if like you want to just go see your family, you know, not allowing travel between states because they're scared you're going to get an abortion while you're there. And other things like that, which really is just going to change like what it is like to leave a state for any reason. It's going to make everything a lot more restrictive and also just infringe upon our rights overall. And additional issues when it comes to overall safety and bodily autonomy of individuals with uteruses, even outside abortions. So thinking like ectopic pregnancies or miscarriages, they pose the potential for the holder of the pregnancy and the doctor to face jail time for completing life-saving procedures. So even when they're saying that they'll allow to save the parent's life, like it's not, people don't want to risk spending their life in prison if they can't prove without a shadow of a reasonable doubt or in a like totally biased jury that it wasn't that. Like an ectopic pregnancy shouldn't even be considered an abortion because they're not even like they're outside It's not a heart. There's nothing alive.
It's never gonna be.
Yeah.
Baby.
It's just going to kill you.
Yeah.
And
even with like miscarriages, like there's already been a few cases of women who died who had miscarriages and the doctor couldn't remove the fetus. And so then it causes infection and then they die. And like things like that. Or like in the States where they've now made it so that they can't do life-saving operations on a mother if she's pregnant at the risk of that infant. But it's the infant will die anyway if the mother dies. So what are we doing?
Yeah.
Make it make sense.
So, and it's just like, because the laws are largely being made by people who don't understand even what a woman is or a person with a uterus is. Like, they don't even understand what that is. They don't know. Like, I remember they were questioning one of the Republican senators and he didn't know what an ectopic pregnancy even was or why that would be like an issue.
Or was he the one where they were like, he was like, can't they just do the thing where you swallow the camera like you would do for like certain stomach things? The person's like, that will never end up in the vagina. Like, it just simply won't be there. So that's why that can't work, buddy.
Yeah. Your baby's not in your stomach.
Yeah,
literally.
buddy. That's not where babies come from.
Yeah.
It's not.
When your mommy told you were in my belly, she didn't mean literally.
Yeah. You meant around that area, you know?
Yeah. So yeah, it's similar to the hierarchy of the Catholic Church in that like the people in charge are the ones making the decisions that often end up impacting the people who have the most to lose in the situation. So like the Catholic Church, America has lots of people in power who don't even know the experiences of what it is to be able to be pregnant and all the risks and dangers and sacrifices that come with that. And like minimize it at every turn. So we're, as you said, Gabe, like we're seeing the repercussions of that. And we did an episode where we had a lot of resources specifically on abortion access and also just like rights and what you can do to help fight against this kind of stuff. And I will find it and link it in our blog because we collected a ton of resources and I'm sure many of them are still relevant.
It was for our Fuck the Patriarchy series, which was in response to the overturning of Roe v. Wade. We saw it happening, and so we pivoted to an entire series about women's rights and how people have been encroaching on that. And here we're seeing just like people being reduced to potential baby carriers and no longer a person.
Yeah. And I mean, because that's how the systems view us. That's how the people in power view us. The people who could be in power view us. So
people who hopefully aren't in power.
Yeah.
Yeah. So fun stuff.
Frustrating.
Yeah. So that is our episode for our Satanic Panic series. Tell us what you think about it so far. We have one more episode of this series and then we'll pivot for the end of the year. Let us know how you feel about this, about the film, Sydney Sweeney, if you want. And if you live in one of those states, you know, talk to us about what it is, like what are the fears that you have, and also what are the resources that you might have encountered that we can share with others. Because I think that's a really important part of like watching films like this and getting angry and sad justifiably. And the next step is, what are you going to do? Like, how can we help each other and ensure that no more lives are lost in such a preventable way, and that people are respected as human beings at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Bare minimum.
And one clarifying thing. I don't dislike people who are Catholic. I hate the church. I hate systems of oppression. That's what I'm yelling at. So if you're Catholic and you're sad because I've said mean things, it wasn't directed at you. It was directed at the people in charge that oppress everybody.
Well, I mean, you mentioned the nun that was doing the work, right? Like people can exist, like you can be religious and you can believe in God and still think the church was doing wrong, right? Like,
yeah,
they had the 13
because God is not the
treatises,
church.
right?
That's like the whole thing.
Hammered the nail. He was like, the church is doing this. Here's the 13 things they did. That was a believer. Like believers be doing that. So, yeah.
You can love a thing and question it at the same time.
Yeah, for sure. Excellent. So make sure you like and subscribe, comment, share, all those things. Support us in this, in this series. And as we get ever closer to 300 episodes of Ghouls, let us know what your favorite episode was. I don't know. Tell us stuff. But don't get married, especially to Jesus. Or...
Yeah. Well, your kids. Or you... it's sad.
Yeah, we don't even want to talk about it. Just don't do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just don't.
Bye.
Bye.